Morvenn Vahl, the Spear of Faith. Or is it just Morvenn Vahl, Spear of Faith? Morvenn Vahl, Spear of Faith. Like many Warhammer fans, which Black Library stories I choose to delve into is heavily dependent on which models I collect. I love listening to stories to help me get some context for my minis and let me come up with fun stories for my own characters that can be easily understood by others who are also familiar with those same backgrounds. So recently I listened to the Morvenn Vahl, Spear of Faith audiobook. It was after I'd picked up a Night Lord's kill team, so I was excited to find a story that prominently featured both this new faction I wanted to learn more about and the Sororitas that I was already pretty familiar with. I know it's been a while since my last Black Library discussion. Unfortunately, my PC exploded and my little laptop doesn't have quite the same video editing power, so forgive me if the visuals are a little static. I love talking about 40k and Warhammer in general, and I intend to keep posting these videos, so if you're into all things grimdark, like and subscribe to see more in the future. Publishing. Morvenn Vahl, Spear of Faith was written by Jude Reed, with an audiobook edition narrated by Emma Gregory. It was released on the 7th of September 2024. The book features cover art by Robson Mikkel, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a physical release is planned for Q3 of 2025, sometime between July and September, so I haven't checked up on any more recent news on that, but hopefully we'll see something about that soon. The story follows Morvenn Vahl, obviously, the Abbess Sanctorum of the Sororitas. She's traveling to Ophelia 7 to end the invasions of the Death of Saints, whose Night Lord has been plaguing their homeworld for centuries, disappearing and reappearing years later. I'll discuss Morvenn's personal journey a bit more in a moment, as there's quite a lot in the book. We see Morvenn's point of view as well as POVs from Elena, a battle sister, Lethe, a penitent prisoner on Ophelia 7, as well as from the Death of Saints himself. Throughout the story, there are some flashbacks to the Death of Saints' childhood as we come to understand both the reasons for him continually invading Ophelia 7 and how he stands in the eyes of the Night Lords he leads. There are quite a few heavy action scenes, but these are well paced and broken up by more character-driven moments, which is something I personally enjoy. I would have liked to have seen more of the day-to-day of Ophelia 7, but the story does cover quite a bit as the sisters battle their way through the war zone that their homeworld has become. Before I move on to specific characters, the depictions of the Night Lord troops in this were pretty cool, and inspired me to go out and get some other models. I got some bikers and a Helldrake, so now my standalone Night Lord's kill team is turned into the start of a new army solely thanks to this book. I've also picked up some Warp Talons after listening to the Aaron Dembski Bowden Night Lord series, which is something I would like to talk about in the future if people are interested in more Night Lords content. So leave a comment if that's something you'd like to hear more about. So Morvenn Vahl. It always takes me a while to warm up to characters in these stories, but Morvenn Vahl was one I definitely found more likable as far as the 40k protagonists are concerned. A mix of practicality and determination is consistent throughout the story as we see her wrestle with her inexperience in leadership, questioning her ability to fulfill her role, and dealing with the possibility of misplaced faith. It's difficult to say too much about Morvenn Vahl and her character, as the whole story kind of is her character, so to explain her would kind of just be to retell a grand amount of the plot. I hope we get more novels with her in the future where she plays a central role. I'd be excited to see her play a larger role in sort of overarching story events, but at the very least I'd like to see her sort of push Sororitas story forward a little bit specifically. Lethe is probably the most engaging character in the story. As a prisoner on Ophelia 7, when the Night Lords attack, she becomes a cultist. Her story's really bleak and tragic, but I always love these more human elements of certain 40k media. I think a lot of other people do too. It reminds me a bit of the parts about the low-level workers in the Forge of Mars series. In the previous novels I discussed, the Sisters of Battle series, there was a character called Lethe. I don't think this is any relation. I don't know if it's meant to be kind of a callback to that, or if it's just coincidence or authors are pulling from some sort of big list of approved 40k names. The Death of Saints is a Night Lord named Kol Rakul. He was an orphan, and through flashbacks we see that he's always had a bit of a violent streak. He'd sort of get into these kind of rage states where he'd be really murderous and want to hurt people. We see him fantasize about violent actions, eventually being inducted into the Night Lords and made into Astartes after they found him during an attack. Though he's always still an outsider, partially because he's not Destramen like a lot of the other Night Lords, especially since I think there's no specific timeline, but it seems that he must have been around for several centuries, so it's possible that he became a Night Lord sort of earlier on when a lot more of them would have been Destramen. Without giving too much away, Rakul wants to both punish the Sororitas and take back something that he sees as rightfully his, and he's willing to destroy himself to see his lifelong enemies suffer. The Death of Saints is one of the most brutal characters I can think of in a Black Library novel series. Back on the Sororitas side, we have Elena. Elena is a POV character in some of the earlier chapters of the story where she plays more of a major role. Later on, she kind of transitions into a more supporting character to Morvenn Vahl, and acts as a bit of a catalyst for Morvenn's introspections as we see her reflect on Elena's choices and beliefs. And I kind of like that, having a foil to this sort of very high up, well-respected, powerful character versus just like a normal person within that faction. Something I've come to notice about Warhammer media is that even when no one faction is meant to be the good guy, a lot of the stories fall into somewhat simplistic us versus them type battles, with the protagonist faction often coming across as the heroes regardless of how morally grey their overall position might be in the grand scheme of the lore. However, in this particular story, I think that works quite well, as the Night Lords are written to be truly detestable with a lot less nuance than we see in other stories like the Aaron Dembski-Bowden novels I mentioned earlier. I was a fan of both the writing and the voice acting for this one. I'm yet to find a Black Library story that is written like a literary masterpiece, and so I find I generally enjoy works where the writing flows just well enough that it's not something you really think about. Just a good, smooth use of the medium to let the reader or listener ride along with the story. One aspect that is particularly notable was the pacing. I really never got bored with this one. Some of the flashback chapters might be a little slow for some folks, and the battle scenes might not be long enough for people who are heavily invested in that part of the 40k novels, but for me, it was just right and almost perfectly struck that middle ground of moving the story forward without anything feeling too rushed or incomplete. As always, with the 40k Sororitas stories, Emma Gregory was a great choice in my opinion. She has the range to define all the characters individually while also keeping the vocalizations realistic and believable. I hope she's happy narrating these stories because I would be very happy to continue to hear more by her in the future. In particular, the way she voiced the Night Lords was brilliant. They sounded absolutely menacing, with the Nostraman accents a good carryover or homage to the Andrew Wincott narration in the actual Night Lord series. The cover art by Robson McKell, again pronunciation I'm sorry, shows Morvenn Vahl standing in her warsuit atop a pile of rubble. I like the way the gold plating stands out against the mostly monotone background, and the background architecture opening up towards the top of the piece is a nice touch. I'm no art critic. Most of the Black Library cover artwork is high quality as far as I can tell, and while the composition in this isn't like the most inspired, it's definitely fit for purpose, especially for a novel with a specific character focus, and holds up to the quality and style that I've come to expect. I think I'm not going to do ratings anymore. Anything that is good enough for me to want to talk about would at least be a 3.5 or 4 out of 5 for both writing and narration, so there's not a lot gained from me discussing that. Instead, I'm going to try and formulate my thoughts on why I think someone might enjoy the story. So this is definitely a read for Sororitas or Night Lord fans, though don't expect the same sort of character depth from the Night Lord series. Rakul is the only one of them that's really explored, and his story is mostly unrelated to any larger Night Lord storyline as far as I can tell. If you're a fan of Imperium politics, I'd recommend at least checking out the start for some interesting interactions between Morvenn Vahl and the rest of the High Lords of Terror, though disappointingly that doesn't flow over much into the rest of the story. If you're looking for a large lore-related piece, then I don't think this one is for you. Like most of the Black Library stories I've looked into, it's pretty singular, and it's not doing too much to drive the overall plot forward, aside from giving a deeper look into Morvenn Vahl, who I hope will play a larger role in the grander plot down the road, but we can never really be sure when or if something like that will pay off. Finally, I'd recommend this if you're building and/or painting the Morvenn Vahl mini. While not exactly a one-of-a-kind character in the 40k setting, just a person in a big power suit, the model itself is unique in the way that they've designed it, and I think it's really cool. I slept on this one for quite a while after it came out. At the time, I think I was on a bit of an Age of Sigmar binge, but it's one that I'm really glad I picked up. I do start writing about a lot of Black Library novels I want to discuss, and what makes the cut really depends on how much there is I want to say about a story. If it gave me some greater insight or understanding into the practices and styles of the Black Library, on how easily it comes out in words. This hit all of those marks really easily, and the fact that there was this much that stuck out to me and that I wanted to discuss even a few months after my first listen, it must mean that some part of it made some sort of an impact. It can be sometimes difficult to discuss these stories the way I would like to without spoiling major parts of the stories, but ultimately I think it's worthwhile to try and give people who aren't sure if a particular novel or series is quite their thing a brief introduction to it, while trying to avoid taking away any of the experience from their first time through it themselves. So thank you if you've stuck around this far into the video. I'm always working on my review skills and trying to improve so that I can give you the type of information and discussion that you're looking for when it comes to the Black Library. So let me know if there's anything you think I can improve on script-wise down in the comments. Until next time, keep exploring the Grimdark. I will probably still be painting the trim on my Night Lords for months.